Right, so thank you very much all for coming. Can you see my face? Because sometimes I feel like the screen is in the way of my face. So yes, this November we are looking at the art of Caspar David Friedrich. I don't know if that's actually the way you pronounce it, but yeah, my German is not very good. But he's one of my favorite artists. But I have learned a lot doing the research for this talk. There's many things about him I didn't know. And just to start with, well, we're going to start with the prayer of to Saint Lucy, and then I'm going to just tell you about the surprise that I had when I started researching for this. Do you see well enough? Okay.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O St. Lucy, you prefer to let your eyes be torn out instead of denying the faith and defiling your soul. And God, through an extraordinary miracle, replaced them with another pair of sound and perfect eyes to reward your virtue and faith, appointing you as the protector against eye diseases. I come to you for you to protect my eyesight and to heal the illness in my eyes. O St. Lucy, preserve the light of my eyes, that I may see the beauties of creation and the glow of the sun, the colour of flowers and the smile of children. Preserve also the eyes of my soul, the faith through which I can know my God, understand his teachings, recognise his love for me, and never miss the road that leads me to where you, St. Lucy, can be found in the company of the angels and saints. St. Lucy, protect my eyes and preserve my faith. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. So when I started when I had the idea of doing a presentation about Friedrich, I didn't know that next year is actually the 250th anniversary of his birth, and there's a lot going on in Germany, in various cities, various special comprehensive exhibitions, with most of his works being exhibited, maybe some of them that have never been seen before by the public. So there are exhibitions in Berlin, in Dresden, in Hamburg, and then in his hometown, which is Greifswald. You will see the name later a bit. Well, he's here. Greifswald. They have a program of events that's going to last for the whole year. So if you have the opportunity to go to any of these things, I encourage you to go. I just said to George the other day, we definitely need to go to some of these. I don't know which one because it's a lot, but we will hopefully choose one of those cities. So here, just to start, I bring you two portraits of Friedrich, painted by two of his friends, so just to see him first from the eyes of some of his contemporaries. The first one on the left is the most recognizable one. I mean, even if you have not heard of Friedrich, there are some paintings I'm going to show you that you have definitely seen, because they have been used in lots of stuff, from other art to adverts to merchandise. And this portrait is quite well known, and it's a very sort of idealized. It's like he looks like a romantic hero. I mean, look at that gaze. And I've seen that painting live in Madrid. There was an exhibition many years ago. I say many years ago, maybe about 15 years ago. And it's incredible. Like, those eyes like literally stare at you, and it's like they go into your soul. This is really amazing. But it is an idealized portrait, whereas the one on the right is more like true to reality. He looks like a father and like a painter just doing his job, which is what he was basically. So, like I said, he was born in Greifswald. I have no idea if that's the correct pronunciation. Sorry for German speakers. In 1774, and he grew up in a family with very strong Lutheran principles and values, and he had very early experiences of death. His mother died when he was very young. Then his sister. Two of his sisters died, I think they were all smallpox. I think his mother and one of his sisters was smallpox. I don't know if the other sister was tuberculosis, I think. And his brother Christopher, his death was particularly tragic because he died trying to save Caspar from having fallen into icy water. So he saved him, but he drowned himself. So that sense of guilt was with him for the rest of his life because he felt that life should have been his brother's life, not his. And because of all the romantic ideas that he would be immersed in, that sense of guilt and the tragedy and reflection over death and stuff, that wouldn't help that sort of melancholy. His first education, I just wanted to include the names of those masters that they're not very well known at all, but they were his first masters, and I thought I should recognize their value as the first masters of this artist, and they were the ones that introduced him to the love for nature, and that inner eye, the seeing within, that gives the title to my presentation today. The seeing the world through your inner self, through your own reflection, if you like. So he studied in Copenhagen for 4 years in the Academy of Art, and then he moved to Dresden, and that's where he lived since 1798. He did various trips to the north. He went to Greifswald, to his hometown, a few times, but he never left Germany. And there are very few paintings or sketches that are not of Germany or of landscapes that are inspired by Germany. There are a few. I haven't brought any, but there are a few. But they're all from prints. Like he never left the country. So forgot to say, Greifswald at the time, it was a very small provincial town, and it belonged to Sweden after the 30 Years' War, and then to Prussia from 1815. So he always considered himself like German, but he was a Swedish file, if that's a word. He sort of considered himself a little bit Swedish as well. This is on the bottom right is an example of one of his first watercolors, and if we compare it with the one by one of his masters in Copenhagen, we already see a sensitive depiction of nature with a connection with those pre-romantic feelings, and interestingly enough with the English garden aesthetics, which are more about a garden that, as opposed to the French garden, which is so very symmetric and looks very perfect, the English garden is all about a garden that doesn't look like a garden, looks like wild nature, but is actually very purposefully created and arranged. And he started very early using the sepia technique with astonishing results. So this sepia is applied like a varnish to a drawing that you've made previously, and it's basically monochromatic. It has that red tone. So the gradation of color that he manages to get with this was described as masterful by his contemporaries. It wasn't a technique that you could get much out of in terms of contrast. And if you look on this corner, the bottom left corner, you see all those rocks are quite dark, but then you see on the this is a beach that goes out to the sea, and you can see the cliffs, but they're so pale, and it's incredible that he managed to do so many different tones just with this varnish. And then, he moved to Dresden, like I said, in 1798. Dresden at the time was very famous for its vast art collections, and he exhibited regularly there, but also in Weimar. And Weimar was the capital of German classicism, so the taste was quite conservative. So it's quite surprising that he was successful there, and he participated in several competitions organized by, I never know how to say his name, Goethe? Goethe. He even got a prize with this work, which is the Pilgrimage at Sunset. And this is where we start to see how in his work, as well as in other Romantic painters' work as well, nature is conceived as a sacred space. I have included in some of the slides some of the quotes. If they don't have an author, it's because they're all by Friedrich. So this is the last drawing I'm going to show you for now. Is the ruins of the Abbey of Eldena, and that was very near his hometown. And it was a place he would go to quite often, and he would draw inspiration from it at different points during his career. And the ruins would inspire many of his later oil paintings. So you have obviously the religious symbolism as well as like an emotional relationship with his motherland. And this is something we're going to talk about in a minute, but the religion and politics are linked, completely linked in the art of Friedrich. This is something I didn't know. I had no idea he was so political. So so it's quite interesting to find that out. So according to Friedrich, a work of art has to represent the sublimation of the spirit and an uplifting of the religious sentiment. And this is a free translation, by the way. I read it in Spanish, so I translated it. So he was part of a group of artists and intellectuals that was called the Circle of Friends in his hometown in Greifswald, and they wanted to promote a more progressive religious art in accordance with the ideas of the then landlord, which was the King of Sweden, which was Gustav Adolf IV. And it was artists, poets who focused on the divine revelation in nature. Examples of this, there was a priest and poet called Kossegarten, and he gave his famous homilies on the shore, which were basically homilies in the open air. And they even built a chapel with designs by Friedrich, which is another thing interesting that I didn't know about him, that he also did architecture planning. So, and that this chapel literally open to the cliffs, so some people would sit outside. Then there was another poet called Schlegel who compared the solitary contemplation of nature with Holy Communion. And then there was another priest and the successor of the Kossegarten who taught that observing nature provided the same spiritual experience as receiving the sacraments. So I'm sure that Father Daniel can tell us a bit more about that later, what he thinks about that. But Friedrich believed in the spiritual properties of art, which is a good thing. And he said, man is not the ultimate objective of man. His goal is the divine, the infinite. He must aspire to art, not to be an artist. Art is infinite, but the knowledge and the skill of the artist are finite. So he started painting oil works around 1807, and this is an example of one of his first works. So you see a sort of megalithic monument, like a megalithic tomb. He had visited many with his masters when he was studying in his hometown. There were many of these sorts of prehistoric ruins around. And the oaks, which are also a leitmotif in his paintings, they appear again and again and again. They have been interpreted in different ways. So they can be as a memory of an extinct pagan past, because obviously the Druids worship the different trees, but especially oaks. But also, and in a completely different perspective, as like the symbol of the German spirit. Is because they are trees that are very strong. They are having been interpreted as sort of very arrogantly, like defying the elements and defying winter and death. They're surviving in the midst of the chill that in the political situation was a foreign regime. So we hear this, we see here this other dimension of the art of Friedrich, which is the political dimension, and that one and the religious one will be intimately linked. So this painting it looks so different in the computer. The colors are much brighter on this screen. So you have to imagine as quite paler than that. And this painting is a perfect example of the idea of infinity in the art of Friedrich. And that was also one of the main ideas in German Romanticism in general. So there is, if you look at the painting and you think about just a normal, a painting that's more like a classical painting you're used to, where there's a perspective, there's a vanishing point, there is no space according to the laws of perspective. Like, where on earth are we? Like, we are like floating in mid-air, and there's almost no landscape. It's barely visible through the mist, and remember the colors are much brighter on this screen. Like, you have to imagine it much paler than this. There is a tiny cross at the top of the mountain, and I'm just going to point it out to you, and you have to believe me, because when I was looking at the painting, I was like, I can't see the cross. It's so tiny. So there is that cross, but obviously what dominates the composition is the mountain, and not even the mountain, it's the fog, it's the vacuum. And it seems to be dawning, probably more than evening. We never know with Friedrich if it's the dawn or if it's the sunset. We never know. With this, it's probably early morning. So is this a religious allegory? Is this a political allegory? If we look at one of his most famous paintings, which is Crossing the Mountains, also known as the Teschen altar, honestly, forgive my German pronunciation, it's really terrible. This quote was applied by Friedrich to another work that unfortunately was lost, but which had the same message and a very similar motive to this one, very similar theme. It was also a mountain, and there was an eagle flying over the top of the mountain. And he said, the German spirit will rise, overcoming the storm and the clouds. There are the tops of the mountains, firm in the sun. So that he was talking about that eagle. So in this case, we could apply the same words to the cross. So this so-called Teschen altar, because it was bought by the counts of that palace in Bohemia for their chapel. As before, as with the one we've seen before with this one of the morning mist in the mountains, there is very limited perspective. Again, where are we? Like, the point of view is from somewhere in space looking at this piece of rock, effectively. The space is almost compressed, like, because it's so dark, because all the objects are set against the sunlight, you don't know how much space there is actually between you and the rock. So we don't know, is it dawning, is it sunset? It's sort of almost open to interpretation. But if you look at the frame, at the bottom there's the triangle with the eye of God, and it's also a Trinity symbol. And obviously you have the wheat and the vine, so it's Eucharistic symbols. And then at the top you see 5 angels and a star in the middle. So this painting was heavily criticized by the more traditionalist critics and artists for being a landscape painting destined to be an altarpiece. But it was actually not destined to be an altarpiece, and that's the whole point of it. So if now we see it without the frame, which was added later, we've mentioned the Circle of Friends in Greifswald, that they were promoting this more progressive religious art with a focus on the divine revelation in nature. So this idea was in accordance with the ideas of the King of Sweden that we've mentioned, that was the landlord at the time of the region. And this painting was painted by Friedrich to give to the King of Sweden. So in sort of for historical context, and this is for me a period of European history that I guess is completely lost, it's so complicated. But in 1806, Napoleon had occupied the majority of the German territories, and there was a very strong anti-Napoleonic movement. And it was neo-Protestant and neo-nationalist at the same time. And that was behind the words of Friedrich and behind this painting. So the cross is a monument to German Protestantism. And the rising sun, because he did say at first that it was the rising sun, that it was dawn, is a symbol of hope and liberation. So it does have a religious connotation, but in Friedrich, normally the religious connotation also includes the political one. How did this end in a chapel of the Counts of Teschen? Because in 1808 there was a military rebellion against the Swedish king, and so Friedrich couldn't give him this painting anymore. So he commissioned the frame from one of his friends and offered the painting to the Count and Countess of Teschen with a new meaning. And he said then he said that it was actually sunset. So he himself said, oh no, it was actually not the sun rising, it was actually setting. He said that the meaning of the painting was that in the sunset of life, hope in Christ stays firm on the rock, which fits very nicely, but it was not the original meaning of the painting. So we come to the end of the Napoleonic invasion in 1812. Napoleon failed to invade Russia. In 1813, something called the Wars of Liberation started, which was also called the War of the Sixth Coalition, which was a coalition between Austria, Prussia, Russia, Spain, the United Kingdom, mainly England, Portugal, Sweden, and a number of German states, in order to defeat Napoleon, and they drove him into exile on Elba. And one of the main battles was in Dresden. So obviously all this was very close to home for Friedrich. And he didn't participate as a soldier, but he helped the war efforts financially, and he produced more political paintings, like this one. Now you wouldn't think that this is a political painting, and it's called Rock Valley, but the subtitle is The Tomb of Arminius. Arminius was a legendary German leader that defeated the Romans, and this is another element of this sort of neo-nationalist, neo-Protestant movement in Germany. This link of those liberal ideas with the legendary, the heroic past. To sort of legitimate the war effort against the tyrant that in the case was Napoleon, in the past had been the Roman Empire. So they went back to the tales and legends of the people, which until then they hadn't been important at all. So if you think of the song of the Nibelungs, which then later would inspire Wagner, and the Nazis would use it later as well to legitimize their own regime. But since the 19th century it was considered like the German national epic. So in both these paintings, what dominates the composition is the landscape, but in both of them, in the first one is more difficult to see because it's inside a cave in the center, but that's the tomb of Arminius there, and there is a very little person sort of contemplating the tomb. There are always little people almost always little people in his paintings, but they're very little, and that's the idea, that you're very small compared to the grandeur of nature. And in this one you also see two little people. There are actually two little soldiers here, and there's a bunch of different monuments. This one looks like an Egyptian obelisk, so there's lots of different influences there. This painting, The Hunter in the Snow, is probably the most well-known of his political, overtly political ones. It was exhibited with the other two, with the previous two, in an exhibition of patriotic art in Dresden in 1814. And the lone hunter is actually a soldier, and he's lost in the frozen woods. And if you see the raven that's on the pine log there, the raven, traditionally a symbol of death, he's watching the soldier. So who is the hunter? Who is the hunted here? This soldier is probably going to die of starvation or of cold. And people in those times would have immediately thought of the Russia disaster of the Napoleonic troops 2 years previous. So possible symbols as well. The fir trees in the background could be the united Germans against the invasion, and the ones in the foreground, because they're young trees, they could symbolize the new post-war generation in Germany. So the so-called Teschen altar, the crossing the mountain that we've seen before, that was the painting that gave Friedrich fame as and sort of, I don't know if you use this word in English, consecrated him as a master artist. And it granted him both very great fame and admiration, both for his skill and also for his political commitment. Two of his most famous works were exhibited in 1810 in Berlin. This is one of them, and they were bought by King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia. And thanks to them as well, Friedrich was granted membership of the Academy of Art in Berlin. So that was obviously very, very high honor. So this is called Monk by the Sea, is the title that is being given. The interpretation of the character being a monk was actually not given by Friedrich, and he said that it was a Faustian figure brooding on the inextricable beyond. If you think that that was a phrase that I had to enunciate very carefully, it's a little bit difficult. If you think that Goethe's Faust was, is it Faust? Faust, thank you, was published in 1808, and he and other poets of his generation expressed a great admiration for these works. So you see the link there. It's basically the idea of man before the immensity of the universe. Some years, actually quite a few years before this, in 1757, Edmund Burke had defined the aesthetics or the concept of the sublime. And I wanted to read you something, and I don't have it ready. There we go. I do have it ready now. This is basically applicable to all German Romantic painting and obviously to Friedrich. So this is what Edmund Burke said about the sublime. The passion caused by the great and sublime in nature, when those causes operate most powerfully, is astonishment. And astonishment is that state of the soul in which all its motions are suspended with some degree of horror. In this case, the mind is so entirely filled with its subject that it cannot entertain any other, nor by consequence reason on that object which employs it. Hence arises the great power of the sublime, that far from being produced by them, it anticipates our reasonings and hurries us on by an irresistible force. Astonishment, as I have said, is the effect of the sublime in its highest degree. The inferior effects are admiration, reverence, and respect. No passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear. For fear, being an apprehension of pain or death, it operates in a manner that resembles actual pain. Whatever therefore is terrible with regard to sight is sublime too, whether this cause of terror be endued with greatness of dimensions or not. For it is impossible to look on anything as trifling or contemptible that may be dangerous. And he says, the ocean is an object of no small terror. Indeed, terror is in all cases whatsoever, either more openly or latently, the ruling principle of the sublime. So keep the idea of terror and the sublime in your head when you look at a painting like this. So this painting breaks all laws of perspective. There is no point of reference. Again, there's the idea of an infinite space. The horizon is extremely low. The sky, which is very dark and almost sort of menacing, it takes almost 5/6 of the painting. If we divide the painting in sort of 6 sections, vertically, the sky occupies almost 5 of those. But still, if you look at the very top of the sky, we do glimpse some sunlight behind the clouds. So there is that sort of hope that we see also in this one. This is the other one that he exhibited in Berlin. The oaks, again, are symbols of pre-Christian religions, and also the abbey ruins remember the medieval past. So in all these sorts of neo-Protestant movement, it was also the neo-Gothic involved, as the medieval past as sort of the nationalistic style of architecture, if you like. There is the burial of a monk going on in the foreground, although you can barely see it because it's all very dark, and you can't really tell the difference between the actual figures and the graves, which is probably the idea as well. Again, in the sky, we do see some light. We don't know if it's dawn or if it's evening, but there is that bit of light of hope. And there is this concept that we can also define from paintings like this, that is negative beauty. So it's something that's beautiful, but at the same time is almost ugly. I don't know if you understand me, but it's the feeling that it gives you. It's like a dead tree is something that is beautiful, but it's really sad at the same time. And it's ugly because it doesn't have any leaves. But at the same time, it's almost like a shadow of the beauty that was before. So it's that idea. And they are very almost monochromatic compositions. Then the vacuum that we've seen in the previous ones of the mountains or the monk by the sea is as important as element as the other objects in the composition. And nature is depicted as being close and far at the same time. It's something that it is very attractive, but at the same time is so grand that is terrifying, like Berg was saying. So the theme of the cross on top of the mountain is present on many of his works. This is one of his biggest paintings. Its measurements are 170 centimeters by 108. I don't know how much that is in inches, but it is one of his biggest ones, and was also bought by the King of Prussia. It was based on a trip to that place that I'm not going to say the name. Riesengebirge. But the landscape is not real. It's always the landscapes in Friedrich are never real landscapes. It's something they draw their inspiration from real landscapes, but they're always in his imagination. The figures were probably added later. You can barely see the figures, but they're at the bottom of the cross. There is a woman dressed in white that is holding the cross with one hand and sort of about to grab the man that is climbing the rock with her other hand. That has been interpreted as faith, which would be the woman, bringing up the painter himself, so Friedrich, up to herself, to faith, and to the cross. But he had a big influence in the Hudson River School in the 1820s, this school of American painters that devoted themselves to represent the beauty of the American landscapes, also as an expression of the divine. So you have an example here, and there is also a cross. In this case, at the bottom of the mountain, and the landscape, the atmosphere is darker. So we could maybe interpret that Friedrich's painting is more hopeful. The cross is always at the top of the mountain, but Church's painting is a bit more melancholic because the cross is at the bottom of the mountain. So like I said, the landscapes are not realistic, but they express certain subjective feelings that reflect on the viewer. I've brought you some of other very famous landscapes by him. This has been interpreted as an allegory of death by some more pessimistic critics. Others say that is just the winter of life. and it's not that so, doom and gloom sort of idea. But again, we see the infinite space. It's like an ocean of snow. We don't see the end. There is a very low horizon again, and there is nothing in the landscape beyond the oak trees. Again, a snow desert almost, but the crippled man that you see here leaning against the rock and with his hands in prayer looking up at the cross. So he has found this crucifix among some young evergreen trees. The young evergreen trees always as a symbol of something that's everlasting, because the young trees could be hope, could be redemption. He has thrown his crutches away from him, so that is also a symbol of he is placing all his confidence in Christ. And there is a shadow of a Gothic church in the mist, which also will be present in many of his paintings. And is it comforting or is it menacing? Because he is a little bit ominous almost, but it will be a leitmotif in his paintings, and it's never very clear the why. Like this one, for example, the Cross in the Mountains. Again, the church is like a shadow, it's almost like a ghost in the background, but it also links with that Gothic or Neo-Gothic revival, that religious reform that went to the medieval past to legitimize the new liberal ideas. The cross has a fountain just at the bottom in the foreground. That could be a symbol of hope again, but the whole atmosphere of the painting is very surreal. It's almost like a dream. It's almost realistic, almost. And we obviously come to one of my favorite paintings. I think it's also one of Father Daniel's favorite paintings. Is if you have never seen any painting by Friedrich, you have seen this one, because he's everywhere. The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, and that's one of his most famous quotes. So in 1815, Napoleon was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo, and because the old regime was restored and all these big liberal ideas of the Romanticism came to nothing. There was an alliance between Austria, Russia, Prussia, and England to stop any resurgence of the ideas of the French Revolution, liberalism, nationalism, or social justice, all mixed in the same bowl. And there was quite a lot of censorship and persecution of intellectuals. Some of Friedrich's friends who were professors at the university or who were also artists lost their posts because of their liberal ideas, or had to go into exile in their own homes. Not physically exile themselves from the country, but basically disappear a little bit from the public life. And Friedrich, he had been a member of the Academy of Dresden as well since 1816, and therefore he had to be careful. So he went a little bit into an inner exile, but he didn't abandon his ideals, as we will see, not even until his death. So with The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, we are again in front of the sublime. The figure has been interpreted as a homage to a fallen hero, a bit like we saw before in those paintings with the tombs of the fallen heroes of old. The fog could symbolize the cycle of nature. Again, it's a similar feeling as the monk by the sea, and the figures in Friedrich's paintings, you never see their faces, and that's partly or mainly because it could be any of us in the place of the wanderer. He's inviting us in, he's drawing us in to look out into the void, because there is a massive chasm between this rock and the mountains beyond. There's only fog in between. And I just brought you this short quote from a friend of Friedrich, another painter called Carl Gustav Carus, who said, "Climb to the top of the mountain range, Look over the long rows of mountains. What feeling moves you? It is a silent devotion within you. You lose yourself in the limitless space. Your entire being experiences a purification. Yourself disappears. You are nothing. God is everything. So, there you go. And this quote by Friedrich as well that you see on the screen is a reflection of that inner exile that he went into. He went into his own world, his own mind, and he was a bit of a tortured mind. But in 1818, he married a woman called Caroline Bommer. There was a big age difference. He was 44, she was 25. And he said that it's a curious thing to have a wife. I don't know, what do you think? It's a curious thing to have a husband as well, you know. But she was a very positive impact in his life. And he said that he had to, in some of his letters, he said that he had to abandon a bit his sort of life of a hermit to like buy lots of furniture and stuff. But he said that it was a pleasant obligation. So there you go. He was very much in love with his wife. And we see from these years on, we see more representations of women in his works. His wife was a model. And also people get bigger. If you look at that, you can actually see the people. So, and there's more color in his paintings. So the one on the sailing boat was bought by Tsar Nicholas I, and it probably is a symbol of life as a journey, which was not a new symbol. It's a journey towards heaven, but also maybe towards political liberation. Again, he never forgot his ideas. And this has to do with the man's clothes, which we will talk about in a second. So it's also very interesting, the frame is very modern. It's almost like a photograph. It's almost like you are taking this photograph inside the boat and you can't get the whole boat in the picture. If you remember Sorolla, this to me reminded me of some of the frames that Sorolla did that were really awkward on boats. And this is a type of frame that will not appear again until the Impressionists. So that was very modern. And the chalk cliffs on Rügen, that was painted during his honeymoon, and it's possibly an allegory of love, because if you look at the shape that the trees make, it's like and the cliffs, it's like a heart. I have never seen that before. I was like, oh. There are possibly two representations of Friedrich himself in the two men. The one on the right would be him as a younger man, looking beyond, again, reflecting on life. And the other one would be, as he saw himself, it's of an old man married to this much younger woman. But the boats in the distance, you see this one framed by the cliffs and that one more in the distance. They will be present in other paintings as the journeys of life again, from the present moment looking towards the future, their hopes, their dreams, the unknown, basically. He will do some more of these friendship paintings. They were not uncommon in the period. It was either couples or pairs of men who were friends. So the second painting on the bottom right is a version of the first. It's a later version of the first. In both of them, if you see the fir tree on the left, it's an evergreen. Again, it's the symbol of the everlasting, in this case, friendship or romantic love. The dead oak on the right could symbolize the state of Germany again. And now the clothes that we've seen in these two, and we see again in these ones, and we also saw them in the one there above the Sea of Fog, those clothes were the old German attire from the 18th century. And they were used by liberals and revolutionaries in Germany during those wars of liberation. So that was his way of expressing that he hadn't abandoned his ideals despite the censorship. And there was that nostalgia for the past, but always looking for a better future. He was still hoping for a better future. This is another one, another example. But this, to me, I don't know, Rose might say you're mad, but to me, this reminds me of Giorgio de Chirico. Giorgio de Chirico, like surrealism.
Oh.
Like, it's like there is nothing. Like, and there's like these two figures against the sunlight in a landscape that you can't identify at all. You don't even know, like, where's the sky, where's the sea? What's the object of the painting? This.
Reminds me of Venice, because they have the tricorn hat.
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
capes and
yeah.
the marshiness.
Yeah, and again, it's because they are all very old-fashioned clothes that tie with those ideals. But yeah, to me, this is like, it's almost abstract, because those figures, like, they have no detail. They're shadows, basically. They're almost like paper cuts. But more paintings with political connotation. Oak tree. Again, here it actually becomes the protagonist of the composition. It relates to the homeland, the patriotic feelings, and it stands proud, defying winter and death. And the other one, the one on the left, the Hutter's grave. Ulrich von Hutter was an exiled humanist from the times of Luther. And again, it's like going back to that first Protestant sort of ideals. Again, is it dawning? Is it sunset? We do not know. This is something more amiable, non-politically related, to just draw a breath. The cycles were quite common in Romantic painting, and this was a commission, actually. And it's the times of day. So we have morning, midday, we have afternoon, and evening. But do not let yourselves be deceived by the amiability of this. The changes in nature are also a reflection of the passing of time, and they're supposed to awake feelings of the fragility of life. If you remember our session on the vanitas and the reflection of how time goes by really quickly and human life is very fragile, this has to do with that as well. Oak tree, again, you're going to be really tired of oak trees by the end of this. All these landscapes, like we said before, they look very realistic at first glance, but they are very carefully composed. They are artificially perfect, like an English garden. I do love English gardens, they're my favorite type of garden. And we talked before about the play between closeness and distance of nature. That it feels very attractive, at the same time it feels terrifying. The oak tree seems to be quite close. It's like we're almost there, right? We're almost at this little pond. But then if we look at the little shepherd that's standing at the bottom, he's tiny. So either we are very far from the oak tree, or the oak tree is huge, or the perspective is completely wrong, which is what's going on. But it is intentional. So the tree is almost monstrously big. And the idea is this idyllic vision that we see of nature in front of the oak tree, this man with his sheep there. It's all very, very calm and peaceful. And then beyond that, we almost just glimpse the towers of the little village that is almost compressed between this plain and the mountains beyond. And it could be interpreted as the idea of the man has to surrender to nature to find harmony and peace instead of being in the city. I feel like Friedrich didn't like city life at all. This is the companion of the previous one, the evening rather than the morning. And again, it's this transcendent vision of contemplation of nature. We see the boats or the ships again as the journey of life. And his contemporaries started to not understand what he was trying to do. They said that he was retreating into this personal mysticism that even he couldn't understand. And I think they had a bit of a point. But he definitely did have an intention about it. But unfortunately, he was denied the position of Professor of Landscape Painting in the Academy of Dresden in 1824. He was the obvious choice, but he was denied it because of his ideals that he never ceased to show through his paintings, because he was very headstrong. I like that, he was very headstrong. That same year, he painted this, and this is one of his most famous paintings, together with The Wanderer, Above the Sea of Fog. This is one of his most famous ones. It wasn't understood at all, and it wasn't sold until after his death, but it's basically a summary of his ideas and his feelings. The ship that's been crushed by the ice blocks, and the first time I saw this painting, I didn't see the ship, and the ship is right there. But you actually don't see it because the blocks of ice like just dominate the composition completely. So the ship that has been crushed by the ice blocks is a symbol of the political situation under an oppressive regime. That is basically nature at its most violent. It's a definitive image of the sublime, this, because it's terrible, it's desolate, it's violent. You can almost hear the crashing of the blocks of ice with each other. But it also has an echo of his own personal tragedy, if you remember how his brother died in the ice. So there's this image of destruction, desolation, but the sky at the very top, again, is in contrast, it's very serene, and we do see a bit of sunlight, and that's the hope of redemption, both personal and political. There is apparently there is a theory that says that he tried to commit suicide, but apparently at some point in his life, but it's not been confirmed. So don't take that as a fact, because it's not known. He was very ill for a couple of years between 1826 and 28, and when he started painting again, he was quite depressed, and his topics became more somber, mainly cemeteries. Very beautiful, but quite sad as well. In the second one on the right, you see an open grave in the foreground, and that has been speculated that it could be his own grave. And since 1830, he isolated himself even more. He knew his art wasn't understood anymore. Time had moved on. He was only valued by his closest friends. But he actually made the most of this by saying, "It is possibly a great honor to have a great audience, but the honor is much greater when one has a small, select audience like you." Wanting to be liked by everyone in general is to please the ordinary. Only the ordinary has a general character. I think that's a killer of a phrase. That is brilliant. In 1830, though, there was a revival of the revolutionary ideals in Germany after the 1830 revolution in France, and that seems to have lifted his spirits a little bit. And he still painted some of his biggest masterpieces, one of which is this one, The Stages of Life. I'm not sure if it was the original title, but it's the interpretation that was given later. And there are many theories about this painting, but the most plausible one is that the older man is him. The younger man, which is for the first time someone is looking directly at us, that is something that has never happened before in his paintings. That's his nephew Wilhelm, and the other three figures are his eldest daughter Emma and his younger children Agnes and Gustav Adolf, who was named after the King of Sweden, if you remember Gustav Adolf IV. And the two little children are playing with a Swedish flag. So he kept that sort of Swedish loyalty back there. And the 5 ships correspond to the 5 people in the painting. And if you see the bigger one is the one that's heavily loaded and is almost coming to the shore. That would be Friedrich at the end of his life. The 2 in the background are his eldest daughter and his nephew, who are sort of in the sort of mid-life, although they were young, but let's say the middle of their life. And the 2 little ones that haven't almost like reached the sea yet are his two small children. And in the foreground, there's also an upside down little boat that has been interpreted as a coffin, maybe his own death as well. And this is the other of his last masterpieces, and the last one that I'm showing you today. It's a very unusual perspective. The streams in the foreground, they almost rise up like this. It's like, to me, it gives the impression that it's like the globe, like this. And the horizon is extremely low. Again, we don't know if it's dawning, if it's sunset, but the colors are exquisite. And the way the water gleams in the midground, where the little sailing boat is, the way that the water gleams there is absolutely beautiful. And it's an image of calm, which I thought was like the perfect one to finish with. It's from 1832, and in 1835 he suffered a stroke. He couldn't paint almost at all anymore. He did some other ink drawings and sepia drawings, but he was basically very ill until his death in 1814.
When?
1840, sorry, not 14, 1840. And that is, I sneaked another one, but yeah, in the thank you one. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
It's just an observation that in some of the sepia paintings that you showed us, some of which actually, they're not just paintings, some of them were engravings, I think. It reminded me a lot of early photography and some of the experiments with reproduction of images in the early 19th century.
In the ones that I showed at the start.
Very, very early.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, like these ones. Yeah. Yeah. Even the angle of this as well. Yeah.
Does he ever paint any oaks that aren't dead or dying?
Actually, is this one dead? Hang on, the one at the end. Sorry, but I'm making you dizzy. This one is not dead.
Yeah, but it's dying.
He's dying. Well.
Now, so the oaks are supposed to represent German spirit.
They can represent death when they're dead. But they can also represent the German spirit that, even though it looks dead, is not dead, and is sort of latent there, and sort of defying the elements. So.
Okay.
I don't know, but I feel like I now want to find this out, because I don't know. It would be interesting to know if Hitler considered this like a good art or degenerate. I would say he would like it, but I'm not sure. I don't want to say yes, because I don't know. But the ideas are quite similar, obviously not taken to that extreme, but yeah. I mean, Hitler was a painter himself, or he tried to.
You said he was influential in America, but was he influential in other countries? England, for instance, where there's a very strong romantic movement?
Yes, and he also took. Yes, I'm not sure if any artist in particular. I could find that out, but he did see. He has some other paintings that are more realistic, and actually I have the book here, and there's one that I didn't include in the presentation because it was a bit too much, but this one is more realistic, and he saw some of Constable paintings, and he was quite taken by Constable, so he also drew inspiration from English painting. So yeah. Father, what do you think about what they thought about the divine, finding the divine in nature?
Pantheism.
It could lead to pantheism, and I think that certainly with later German thought You know, the Nazis were effectively pantheists, weren't they? So I think we have to be careful with it. We have to see nature reflecting God rather than finding God in nature.
In nature. Yeah, I think they didn't cross the line, but they were about to cross it, weren't they? Because they were still talking about God as God.
Yes.
But they were at the limits. So, yeah.
They had a funny comment, made a funny comment about the sacraments.
That priest said that.
Is it a Lutheran?
I'm assuming he was a Lutheran. What was his name? Not Kosegard, and the other
Who
one.
applied the title monk? I mean, that's just way off.
Yeah, I mean, the figure is sort of dressed in as some sort of black garments and long garment. I think that's why it was interpreted as a monk. But where was this? He said that he compared the solitary contemplation of nature with Holy Communion, this poet called Schlegel. And then this other priest, Schwartz, he taught that observing nature provided the same spiritual experience as receiving the sacraments. That's where they were crossing the line, right?
Yes, and I suppose the sacraments use physical things to lead us to God. That's what he means by that, perhaps. But nature is too vague, if you like, to be just on its own direct experience of God.
Yeah.
And you notice that all the things that we use in the sacraments are nature transformed first by man's hands. The wine and the oil and the bread, actually things that we've done something with, so it's not raw nature.
Yeah, whereas what he was saying, for example, in the... I'm going to do it like this because otherwise I'm just going to make you mad.
Quite unusual for his.
That's an interesting painting.
Are you sure he never left Germany?
This one, what he was saying was actually the opposite of what you just said, because he was saying that wild, he constructed it very carefully in the painting, but wild nature where the shepherd is where man finds peace and happiness instead of in the city or even in a village, because that's sort of corrupted. And I guess that goes with Lutheran ideas of, man is corrupted and you cannot do nothing about it, basically. So
do you happen to know, did he write about his own paintings and provide interpretations, or are these interpretations imposed on them by other people? Did he?
For some of them he did, like for example for the one for the altar, the one that's called the Thessian altar, the cross on the mountain, when he said first very cute polar bears, that he said first that it was sunrise and then sunset. With some of them he did, but others were just interpretations, later interpretations.
Julie has a question.
Hello, sorry.
Why was the crosses like hidden? So you couldn't see the crosses, like that was something that was like.
What, in the one with the hang on?
Was it trying to hide the crosses, or is there like a political thing behind it?
Well, in this one that you couldn't see the cross at all at the top. No, I think the idea is a bit similar than this. It's like the cross is there, but what dominates is nature. And so obviously, like, it's almost like Christianity is sort of making sense of that nature, so that's why it's at the top. So it is a positive, it's not that it's a negative vision of Christianity at all, it's just, it's a different vision to what we would have.
But our eyes, or I feel my eyes, carried beyond that cross into some sort of
infinity, yes, the infinite distance.
The infinite beyond, exactly. Yeah, where no man has ever gone before. Sorry, I had to drop the geeky. But yeah.
Impressionism were starting, no? Like, what influence did he have on that movement? Because he never went out of Germany.
No, he never did. The short answer, I don't know if he had any impact. I don't think so, because his ideas were quite different from Impressionists, and also
It reminds me of Turner.
Yes, later Turner. Yeah, it does.
Increasing abstraction.
Took the words right off my mouth.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I'll forgive you. Yeah, no, if you look at the paintings, the later paintings of Turner, he takes the abstract sunrise, sunset into a whole new dimension, and you don't even know whether there is anything
no,
more
true.
exciting to step into.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I think also when probably then, like, maybe not in the French Impressionists, in Turner, yes, no, definitely. When he died, like his paintings were considered like by most of his contemporaries as quite old-fashioned already. Like there wasn't a taste for that anymore, and it wasn't until early 20th century that he was sort of rediscovered and like recognized as a really great artist. So, but I think also the Romanticism has been a little bit considered like, oh yeah, these people who like were very, they wanted to commit suicide all the time and stuff. And I think it's just so much more interesting than that, I remember when I said to a lecturer of mine at university that I wanted to do a project, and he said, what do you want to do it about? There was no 19th century department. So I said, well, I would like to do it about the 19th century. And he went, the 19th century didn't give anything to art history. And I was like,
What planet?
Yeah, kind of following on from that point, I read a book recently called The Birth of the Modern, 1815 to 1830. And even reading that, like, in my blinkered sense, I've always thought, wow, the 20th century in terms of warfare and stuff like that. Like, just going back to that period in European history, it's such a mess.
It is
and
mess.
then the Napoleonic era and all of that. And what that birthed in terms of the modern and the romantic. I think with the romantic, you sometimes think they were just kind of navel gazing, but they were responding to massive upheavals in technology and warfare and political ideas.
But if you look then at, like, even symbolist painting later does have a connection with this a little bit. Like Rose said, with Impressionists, like Turner, had a connection with this, and like, it's like even just ideologically, like he was very, and this is something I didn't know about him, that he was so committed to those ideals, and those were ideals that would come again in the 20th century in a very sinister way, but they would.
But even before that, Germany became a thing. So it would have been his ideal coming to.
His ideal coming to fruition. It would have been interesting to see how he would have reacted to the Nazi regime, like how that would have resonated with his own ideals at the start. Because the idea of a united Germany and the united German people, I think that was one of the main things of the German Romanticism. So.
But at that stage, Germany was still many states, wasn't it?
Yes, because after.
So it's more about the language, maybe.
It was. I think the region where he was, like Dresden and Greifswald, that belonged to Prussia, before to Sweden and then to Prussia. So it was like the. So. And then, if you ask me about later dates, no, I remember.
During his lifetime, he changed between Swedish Pomerania, to being Poland. To Prussia and North Poland. So after the Napoleonic Wars, Prussia wasn't actually declared as a state until the 1920s.
I remember like studying the revolutions also of the 1820s, 1830s and 1848 like at school and thinking, Like, it was such a big.
Briefwald is in Germany, isn't it?
Yes,
Or-
yeah,
not
yeah, it is, yeah. I'm not sure where it is right now, but yeah, it is in Germany.
As we said, I don't know, anyone's seen there's a film, the biopic of Napoleon coming out.
Yes.
Coming weeks.
Yeah.
And in the trailer, there's a scene where a troop heads out over the ice into Russia and falls through the ice. And
Yes. Yeah,
I
it's
think
a sort of.
some of this is in that cinematography.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be an interesting film to watch. Being Ridley Scott, you can imagine.
Yeah.
Very spectacular. Not sure about the history, but
Napoleon was actually inspired by the work of Caspar David Friedrich, and he actually had armor, and he had famous painting of Napoleon on horse.
Yes.
On the Alps. Yeah, that was inspired completely by Caspar David Friedrich as well.
Yeah, he did. I think that like it's an artist that is very well known. As, for example, The Wonder About the Sea of Fog, everyone has seen that painting, everyone knows that painting, but I don't think there has been that much research on him. So, I think with this anniversary coming up next year, I think there will be a lot of stuff going on. So hopefully we'll be able to go to Germany. Paris trip, yeah. It's expensive.
Yeah, Berlin's a lot more expensive than it used to be.
Yeah, so I don't know, we'll see. Right, I think some people need to go to Vespers.
Sing a little.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you so much.